if we try and look at China then in a systems context globally, one of the other books on our list is The Chaos Point by Irvin Laszlo, where he tries to apply systems thinking and suggests that when we reach these constraints, as we seem to be, where actually the current path isn't sustainable, then something has to change, and it's either break down or break through. How do you see the sort of systems dynamics of this?
Yes, well, let me say first that Irvin Laszlo is one author who has influenced me very much. In the days when I wrote The Turning Point, he wrote a very simple general introduction called The Systems View of the World, I believe, which is an introduction to systems thinking, and I've read several others of his books, and he has been very influential. Well, this is a very good example of how the scientific progress in the last 25 years has helped us understand this better. I'm talking here about the process of emergence, about the fact that every living system is stable, able to maintain its structures over a long time. That's, a very important characteristic of life. Although there is continual structural change in terms of metabolic flows and in terms of nutrients and waste flowing through the system, in spite of these changes, the overall pattern of organization of the system is maintained. However, every now and then, the system will encounter an instability. And this happens when there's a disturbance either from the outside or from the interior of the system. And this disturbance is amplified by so-called positive feedback. And these self-amplifying feedback loops then make this disturbance larger and larger until the system as a whole becomes unstable. And then, as you just said, there can be breakdown or breakthrough. And more often than not, there's a breakthrough to a new order, a new way the system organizes itself. Technically, this is called a bifurcation point, and the transition to a new attractor around which the system is organized. And this is what we can observe at the social level. Well, first, let me say, maybe give you an example at the personal level, because people can identify with that very well. Anybody who is creative, which is, most people, practically, or everybody, has had the experience that we have worked on a problem and studied it, thought about it, got more and more confused, got more and more information, and then had a sort of mini crisis where we say, now we are totally confused, totally discouraged, and we give up. And we stop what we're doing, we go for a walk, we take a shower, we listen to music, we do something else. And while we're doing this, there is a flash of insight, and we see a solution at a new level. That's the kind of breakthrough where you have an emergence of new order, a spontaneous emergence of new order. That's the very core of creativity. Well, socially, this also happens when there's a disturbance that, for instance, there is an environmental organization that makes a demonstration of a very imaginative way. Suppose they do some street theater to highlight a problem with an industry or corporation or something, and that gets shown by television, and that introduces a disturbance in the general population, and then something clicks and something changes. Or key events like the film An Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore, or the Stern Review that was published in October 2006 in the UK. Things like this are key events which you can see as key disturbances that lead to the emergence of a new order. This is how I see change happening.
Now, when we try and grapple with this change, often what we see is not so much just one trend like a new innovation breaking through, but at the same time we see things seemingly going in the wrong direction even faster. So we see an acceleration of loss of biodiversity. We see, the economy growing faster than ever before, and consumption going up. And at the same time, we see these potential solutions innovating and so on. Is that normal in the system?
Yes, and actually, I started in the first chapter of The Turning Point. I started with this analysis of social and cultural change, where you have these waves, and when you have the new forces, which are called the rising culture, when you have this rising culture developing, the old system still continues on its path, and things get worse before they get better, but you already have the germ of the new ideas and the new systems. And that's the situation we find ourselves in now. And the question is, are we going to make it or not? Because, as you say, the growing economy and growing material consumption continues.
Now, some of the language of systems thinking has been adopted very widely now, and especially around sustainability. So things like the idea of a tipping point, or the idea of the sort of chaos theory butterfly that flaps its wings. I mean, but what does this actually mean scientifically? How do these things really happen?
Well, I think the tipping point is another idea of talking about emergence, the spontaneous emergence of a new order. And I think you have to really study what is happening, and I haven't done this in detail, to study how social change is happening and how you can see it from a systems point of view. I've been interested in this for a long time, and I've talked to a lot of people, so I can give you some examples. Actually, one example is from South Africa, which you may remember. When the cultural transformation happened in South Africa in 1989, this was the result of a very long, complex process. And I know this because I have friends in South Africa. I have a friend who is a sociology professor who was very involved in this whole movement and who told me about the details. And he told me that for years in South Africa you had small groups of people meeting for private conversations to discuss new values, new ways of living, new ideas. And so by the time of the late 80s, the ground had been prepared through these discussions of thousands and thousands of people. And then happened the critical disturbance. And the critical disturbance was the stroke of the president, was it Botha, who had a stroke. That was the critical event. The ANC and the people who were lobbying for social change had arrived at some coherent view of how to do things, and now there was the opportunity, but there was still an important step, and the important step was that the succeeding government of what was his name? Clark?
Yeah, de Klerk.
De Klerk, yes. The succeeding government of de Klerk needed to make a decision. Are they going to suppress the opposition and impose force, or are they going to engage in dialogue? And the ANC also had to make the same decision. Are they going to have a violent revolution, or are they going to engage in dialogue? And both parts decided to engage in dialogue, and soon after that Nelson Mandela was freed, and the whole change happened. Now, from a systemic point of view, there's much more to it, because it is also true that one of the main arguments of the apartheid government was that they have to defend against communism. And so at the same time in 1989 the Berlin Wall had come down, and Prague, there was Václav Havel with the Velvet Revolution, which had followed a similar pattern. many discussions, many conversations, and then non-violent change and engagement in dialogue between Havel and his people and the Soviet communists. So all of that, I think, had an influence on public opinion in South Africa. So, I mean, this would be a fascinating story to write and to have a real systemic analysis with, witnesses who are still alive. How did things happen in your country? How did this influence others? You could interview, Havel and Gorbachev and de Klerk and, Mandela and various people. Would be really fascinating.